What if Tank Davis, who can punch, who is a hell of a fighter, who is a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter, what if he lands a punch on this bigger guy's chin, right, who's not a professional fighter? What happens?
They do it for real. Tank is highly capable of taking Jake Paul out. So the exhibitions that I like to see are ones that either I can mythically look at and say, wow, well, if he would have did that back when he was 10 years younger or 8 years or 12 years ago, he would have beat him. You understand me? Because we know boxing.
He hits you because he's so accurate, he's going to drop you or could put you to sleep. But like not necessarily power punch. Like Edwin De Los Santos is a hard hitter. He would even have a hard time with rollies.
Boxing legends analyze why Gervonta Davis will demolish Jake Paul within 3 rounds. Gareth A. Davies notes that during the press conference and face-off, Gervonta remained calm and barely reacted to Jake Paul's taunts about his height. He adds that while Tank appeared a bit hesitant, as if pressured into the fight, once the bell rings, he expects Davis to unleash explosive combinations that will silence Jake completely.
He reminded me of a northern football fan being dragged to a shopping centre on a Saturday afternoon rather than being allowed to go to his favourite Liverpool seat. You'll relate to that, won't you? It was almost like he'd been shackled and dragged there against his will. Even when they faced off, it was as if Jake Paul had a bad smell about him or something. He didn't want to get near Jake Paul. He didn't want to. Just going to plug this in as well. I just realised it's not plugged in. It was almost as if he didn't want to indulge anyone at all. Like he'd signed up against his will, and then like he'd been signed up against his will. The agents and his manager and his handler had dragged him there without briefing him on what was going on and where it would be and what time it would take place. And there was this oaf in his mind standing there in front of him, this big oaf who kept posturing, and it just didn't do anything to him. I wondered at one point whether he was going to burst out with a combination of punches or something and just drop Jake Paul, who was being, measuring him up and going down to his height, and it was all very peculiar in my view. Like he really wasn't taking it seriously.
Ryan Garcia doesn't hide his frustration over the Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis matchup. He calls it a complete insult to the sport, criticizing the massive size and weight differences between the two. To him, this isn't a real boxing contest but a spectacle created to grab attention rather than earn respect. Ryan insists that boxing should stand for skill, legacy, and fairness, not social media stunts. Watching a smaller fighter like Gervonta face a naturally bigger opponent like Jake feels wrong to him, especially when it's promoted as competitive. He argues that this event sends the wrong message to young fighters, that hype and money can outweigh discipline and honor. For Ryan, it's not about entertainment, it's about protecting boxing's integrity. He sees this fight as a mockery of the craft he's dedicated his life to.
No more, we're not falling for. You're not a fighter no more, we're not falling for that. You're ranked as a cruiserweight and you're out here trying to fight a lightweight. And then on top of it, you were just talking about fighting Anthony Joshua. That doesn't make no sense. And, I just felt like it was a disgrace to boxing and kind of it was not a good move by Jake Paul. I understand people saying, Gervonta got to go get his money, blah, blah, blah. But, we're not talking about that shit. We're talking about the sport, bro. We're not talking about, you got to get that money, bro. Yeah, but everybody's open to criticism. That's the whole point of this media shit. Right. That's why they talk about basketball players. They don't talk about, LeBron's making too much. Nobody cares, bro. If LeBron's missing the shot, he's missing the fucking shot. So at the end of the day, bro, I just thought it was a disgrace to the sport. Because on one end, you got the casuals, right? The casuals don't see the weight difference. They see Jake Paul and Gervonta Davis. Yeah. And if Gervonta Davis doesn't fuck up Jake Paul, they're going to think Jake Paul is some pound-for-pound champion type of fighter. Yeah. And to me, that's just it's tricking the public, and it's kind of bullshit, bro, at the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, if Gervonta was Jake Paul's size, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. There probably wouldn't even be a fight. Yeah, you know what I mean? So I just think that it's a disgrace to boxing.
well, we got to play devil's advocate because people were saying, well, Ryan, you called out Jake Paul before too, so how would you say that? What do you have to say to the people that were saying that?
Well,
to you?
I'm way bigger than Gervonta Davis. Gervonta Davis is 5'4", and his last fight was at 133. My last fight was 147, and I walk around 170. So, I mean, 170 to 190, whatever, however big is not too much difference. But you got Gervonta Davis, he's actually really small. Like, when I fought him, he's small.
Yeah.
So I just think it's a very unfair fight. Nobody was complaining when Jake Paul was fighting Julio Cesar Chavez.
Right.
Nobody was complaining when he's fighting Anthony Joshua. And I still think Jake Paul's a cool dude. But shit, he's calling me out on my shit. I'm gonna call him out on his shit, bro. That's a fucking disgrace of a fight.
Yeah.
You know it. Just like the Mike Tyson low-key was a disgrace, but we accepted it. But he was 60 years old. I mean,
right.
What the f we talking about
60.
here?
That's crazy.
Sean Porter views this matchup through a veteran's lens, seeing it as a reflection of where modern boxing is headed. He believes today's generation is more focused on quick paychecks than long-term greatness. In his eyes, Gervonta Davis has joined the group of fighters chasing money over legacy. Porter explains that legends once risked their records for glory, facing the best to etch their names in history. Now, he says, fighters prioritize brand deals, social media fame, and short-term profits. To him, Tank's decision to fight Jake Paul instead of pursuing meaningful challenges exposes how the sport's priorities have shifted. Porter insists that Tank is among the most gifted fighters of his era but laments that he's wasting his prime on sideshows instead of legacy-defining battles. His criticism isn't just of Tank, it's of the entire trend of money-driven matchups that, he says, are slowly eroding boxing soul.
How do you sort of see this scenario now for him?
Yeah, I don't really know how to feel about it, what to really say about it. I've only been asked this when it's been presented to me. That's when I think about it, and I can't really come up with a good answer for it. In a lot of ways, it doesn't make sense to me. Of course, we know the size differential, and the list goes on from there. I don't know, man. I think we're entering a generation now, or a phase now where fighters, I don't know if it's fighters. I don't know if he doesn't care about the legacy, or if he feels like this fight doesn't matter. I'll get back to the legacy. I just don't know. This is truly it's not a legacy fight, but of course it is a generational money.
Many analysts believe the issue lies not just with the fighters, but with the audience itself. They argue that today's fan base fuels the circus. True technical bouts between elite boxers often go unnoticed, while exhibition and influencer fights dominate headlines. They blame social media's short attention span for pushing boxing away from substance and towards spectacle. According to them, the Jake Paul phenomenon isn't his fault alone, it's the audience rewarding chaos over craft. When fans tune in only for trash talk and viral moments, real fighters lose motivation to take risks for respect. Analysts also point out that this fan-driven trend has blurred the line between professional sport and pure entertainment. Real champions fight for belts, influencers fight for clicks. And as long as fans keep buying those pay-per-views, the power will continue to favor spectacle over sport.
Boxing has evolved to where it's at. I'll expand on that. For one, you have good fights where I'm not talking about these type of fights, crossover type of fight, former Disney guy, influencer stuff, not. And Jake Paul has really promoted himself and acquitted himself to the point where he's kind of a boxer. Now, he hasn't fought the top names, I get it, blah, blah, blah. But he's doing his thing. He's training like a boxer. He's not like taking it lightly, like streaming and then working on his YouTube more than he's working on his boxing. It is what it is, right? But beyond that, let's keep it going. I told you I'm about to really get unpacked. Subscribe to the channel. The reality is, the reason why I'm saying I blame you, the fans, is because we've had some very good fights, like David Benavidez, Caleb Plant, whatever. I'm talking in the last 5-10 years, right? Very good fights, all boxing. So not talking influencer or any type of crossover fight, right? Good fights. And then you got boxing fans in a niche sport who didn't further the exposure by advertising or buying the fight, mostly buying the fight with piracy and whatnot. So now we're at a point in this society where these companies They're like, all right, they see the piracy is a problem. Now they're looking for sure shot, must win type of scenarios. That's why we're getting these fights that some people, purists and diehards, are calling wonky fights. You know what I mean?
One major concern among boxing professionals is the massive size difference between Jake Paul and Gervonta Davis. Jake naturally walks around at cruiserweight, while Tank's true division is lightweight. Analysts emphasize that no matter how skilled Davis is, the laws of physics still apply. Reach, weight, and power matter. They warn that matching Tank against Jake in a sanctioned fight would be both unfair and dangerous. Jake can take punches from bigger men and keep coming forward, while Tank, despite his knockout power, would need to close the distance against someone far taller and stronger. Critics argue that such mismatches shouldn't even be approved under standard boxing regulations. On paper, Jake holds the size advantage, while Tank has the edge in speed and skill. Still, the imbalance makes the matchup deeply controversial. For traditionalists, it's yet another sign that boxing's rules are bending under the weight of entertainment.
This versus Jake Paul fight. Tank, a massively powerful fighter at 135 pounds, but his punch output is among the lowest in the sport. Jake has a pretty decent punch output for a guy that's 200 pounds. He hits hard in his own right, but doesn't have the skill and capabilities anywhere close, or the feet, or the hand speed, or the eyes anywhere close to Tank Davis, but has a power that Tank Davis has probably never felt, but just because Jake is naturally 70 pounds bigger than him, right? So 10 rounds, 3 minutes, who starts to show the wear and tear first? I know if Tank touches him on the jaw, it's probably not going to feel like roses, regardless if he's 135 or 150 or whatever he steps in that night. He's still a Tank and has still put guys down as he's gone up in weight, but Jake is just so much bigger. How much will the power that Tank has?
Showbiz the Adult takes a deeper look at Gervonta Tank Davis's legacy and how fragile it has become. He notes that Tank's career has often been criticized for lacking truly dangerous challenges, and now, with the Jake Paul fight, his credibility could take another hit. Showbiz argues that Lamont Roach's recent performance against Pitbull Cruz, Tank's most notable opponent, highlights how competitive the division really is. If Roach performs better against Pitbull than Tank did, it raises serious doubts about Tank's claim to dominance. He explains that boxing is a sport built on perception. If someone beats your best win more impressively, fans start to question your greatness. That's why Showbiz warns Tank to be strategic about his career choices. Fighting Jake Paul might bring money, but it adds nothing to his legacy. In fact, it only gives critics more reason to question his motivation and hunger for true greatness.
I don't even know how you cannot have him better than Tank. People question Tank's resume anyway. But if you make Tank take a knee and they don't call it a knockdown and you still get the draw, you beat him. You beat Tank. And then you dominate Pitbull, one of Tank's best wins. Bruh, you better than him. The resume, listen, bruh. I didn't say greater. I said better. The resume means politics. Ryan was just saying it. Lamont Roach could have been on a back burner and they were holding him back, so he had to go down to 130, doing the grunt work like Marvelous Marvin Hagler, waiting for his time to shine. Resume, if the business chooses you, they can move you along right. He actually get cherry picked and he best Tank, and then he stops Pitbull. He's better. Y'all know how the business of boxing works. You just saw Terrence Crawford actually be the best fighter we've seen in decades. The man, Terrence Crawford, can arguably be better than Floyd Mayweather. Y'all saw the business shitting for all of his career, practically all of his career. And you see that he's better than Nello? What a surprise! We've been seeing a guy coming from lightweight can beat Nello at super.
Lamont Roach adds another layer to the controversy by exposing the business conflict happening behind the scenes. He claims that Tank was contractually expected to pursue a rematch, likely against a top contender, but instead chose Jake Paul for the bigger payday. Roach believes this decision reveals where Tank's priorities now lie. It's no longer about proving himself, it's about securing easy money. He stresses that true fighters honor their contracts and their word because boxing's integrity depends on it. Roach acknowledges Tank's elite skill and killer instinct but says this move raises serious doubts about his discipline. Many fans feel disappointed, believing the rematch could have been Tank's opportunity to silence critics who question his dominance.
And if this whole Jake situation was in the way, holler at me. Tell me you want to fight Jake. Tell me you got a bag coming up. All right, boom. Like,
Go do
it's a way to handle that. We have a contract. You cannot breach a contract and think shit just gonna be sweet. You can't. You can't do that.
Right.
We have a contract. So it's not like this wasn't supposed to happen or whatever the case may be. And he just went and took the Jake route. We had a signed contract to fight. So him breaching the contract is, if y'all put yourself in my shoes, you gotta think, I'm looking forward to fighting and getting paid. I'm looking forward to fighting and winning so I could be two-time world champ. Me. I'm in training for a fight to be a champion in another weight class and for me to be crowned champion twice in my career. And this just go ghost and then end up announcing another fight. Put yourself in my shoes.
Did you find out just like the rest of us did?
Kinda. I was on the fence because they didn't announce. They was like, all right, we're gonna announce. All right, we're gonna announce. All right, they're gonna announce every week. All right, we're gonna announce the fight. I'm like, all right.
Max Kellerman brings balance to the debate, acknowledging Jake Paul's undeniable influence on the business side of boxing. He points out that no modern fighter sells tickets or generates buzz quite like Jake does. That's why professionals keep accepting his offers, not out of respect for his skill, but because they can't match his marketing reach. Jake has become the sport's biggest promotional machine, and even established champions crave a share of that spotlight. Kellerman, joined by Pauli Malignaggi, also discusses whether Tank's knockout power can carry over against a naturally bigger opponent. They agree that Tank's explosiveness is world-class, but they both question whether it will be enough to overcome the physical disadvantage. Interview 9.
There's a lot of limited knockout artists, though, man.
He's one of the least active punchers in the game with the highest knockout percentage of current heavyweight.
But if he was a real knockout artist,
champions.
If he was a real knockout artist, prop him up against the best of the best. Felix Trinidad was a knockout artist. He was knocking out the best of the best. If you're a real knockout artist, prop him up against the best and show us how he smokes them. But the way we did when Felix Trinidad was doing it. You know, the way they did when Mike Tyson was doing it in his prime. Say what you want about the Mike Tyson era. He knocked out everyone from 1986 to 1989. Everyone got knocked out. Everyone.
Well, by your standard, you could say that Tyson was to a degree manufactured.
No,
and
because
Teddy
he fought everyone that was there. Everyone that was there at that time fought.
Teddy Atlas will 100% agree with this,
with the expense of
Witherspoon. That were afraid of him.
With the exception of Witherspoon. No, but they all, doesn't matter. He knocked them all out. There was nobody you could say in that era except maybe Witherspoon, who I contract issues with King at the time. Except for Witherspoon, there is nobody Tyson didn't fight in that.
Eddie Griffin closes the discussion with a cynical yet thought-provoking perspective, arguing that Jake Paul's fights are less about competition and more about controlled entertainment. He calls them Hollywood fights, suggesting that outcomes are designed to protect profits rather than uphold sportsmanship. Griffin cites the Mike Tyson exhibition as an example, claiming Tyson could have ended it early but didn't, because that wasn't part of the deal. In his view, the same dynamic might unfold in the Tank fight, a show scripted more for spectacle than truth. If Jake Paul gets knocked out too soon, the hype dies. If he lasts longer, the money doubles. Griffin believes both camps understand the financial stakes, which is why the event feels more like a performance than a genuine rivalry. Still, he admits that fans will watch regardless, proving once again that in modern boxing, controversy sells better than authenticity.
If Jake Paul's involved in it, it's a great acting job. You know Mike Tyson could have just knocked Jake Paul's face into the canvas, but he got paid to pull punches, otherwise he wouldn't have got paid. I'm pretty sure the same is going for Gervonta Davis. It's a quick money grab. Most of y'all gonna be suckers who tune in. It's this quick money grab. That's all I'm saying. Ain't gonna be no fight. I don't give a fuck how big Jake Paul is. He can't take one of them little mother tank punches. And tank move furniture. Move furniture. Catch that motherfucker Move furniture. And Jake don't like his furniture moved, so he gonna pay him not to hit him again. If you really want to show out Gervonta, sign a contract that you ain't gonna hit him, because if you hit him, you lose all the money. And then whoop that motherfucker's ass, put him to sleep, and get him out the boxing game once and for all. Let's go up again.